Baz Luhrmann's 2022 musical biopic, Elvis, could easily be the best cinematic release of the year. The movie has it all: a star-studded cast, scandals, and terrific cinematography. There's no way anyone can possibly object to the film. Hold on to those words, because a couple of Reddit users shared their unpopular critiques of the critically acclaimed musical biopic. From objecting to Tom Hanks' portrayal of Colonel Parker to objecting to Luhrmann's direction, here are 10 unpopular opinions about the Elvis movie. Starting with number 10, Colonel Tom Parker wasn't that bad of a guy. The plot of any movie is based on the same framework. Introduce the bad guy in the first segment, really accelerate his antagonism to 100 in the plot, and then have the protagonist dissociate from the antagonist right before the credits roll in, or give the bad guy a fair shot at retribution. The framework is pretty easy to follow when it comes to fictional pieces, but could Luhrmann follow through with it in a biopic? Well, he tried to. Tom Hanks' character, Colonel Tom Parker, aka Elvis Presley's manager, took on the role of the villain in the 2022 musical film. In real life, the Dutch native had a severe gambling addiction and often forced his unethical marketing ploys onto the singer for his own gain. Notwithstanding the fact that Colonel Parker wasn't a good guy, some believe he wasn't that bad either. In the movie, Presley famously fires Parker during a performance after finding out that he had lied about his US nationality. Back in real life, he fired him after a squabble ensued with the owner of the Hilton Hotel backstage. Parker was, in fact, a Dutch national and had lied about his nationality. However, this fact wasn't revealed until after Presley's death in 1977. Coming up at number 9, Luhrmann's cinematography felt like a fever dream. The critically acclaimed Australian filmmaker Baz Luhrmann is known for producing masterful pieces such as the 2013 film The Great Gatsby, the 2001 film Moulin Rouge, and the 1996 classic Romeo and Juliet. You can easily spot a Luhrmann production just by its cinematography. The actor-turned-filmmaker is very particular when it comes to aesthetics, camera angles, and shoot locations. Everything has to be in sync. According to the man himself, he wants the viewer to feel immersed in the universe that's being portrayed on screen. Speaking of which, a few users compared Luhrmann's choice of camera tricks to being reminiscent of a fever dream. They believed that the filmmaker focused way too heavily on aesthetics and didn't provide enough substance to the film itself. Yikes. Next up at number 8, Presley wasn't the social hero the film made him out to be. Elvis Presley was quite easily one of the most controversial figures in history. The musician was known for his flashy and often sexy performances, his alleged promiscuity, and his admiration for black artists at a time when segregation was at its peak. Presley was the perfect candidate for a biopic, so much so in fact that over 13 of them had been made on the man in the last couple of decades. Nevertheless, Luhrmann's retelling of the legendary icon's story deserves a place at the table, but according to one user on Reddit, the spot might be at the kids' table. The user alleged that while Presley was undoubtedly controversial, Luhrmann overly dramatized his opinions on social injustices and was more or less a silent figure in the entire fiasco. The musician did, however, release a single, If I Could Dream, dedicated to Dr. Martin Luther King shortly after his passing. Moving on to number 7, Presley's relationship with Priscilla wasn't accurate. Interestingly enough, Priscilla was one of the few actual people from the musician's life that the filmmakers interviewed to gain better insight into his life. However, a few biographers believed that Elvis's former wife couldn't be cited as a credible source owing to their short-lived marriage and the fact that she was a literal child when the two started dating. That's right, in Luhrmann's retelling of Presley's life, he cleverly skips over the fact that Presley's romance with Priscilla was more or less a crime. Actually, it was pretty much leaning towards more. All Luhrmann shows is that the young teen's parents were unhappy with Presley pursuing their daughter, and for a good reason. However, it might be worth mentioning that almost 50 years after her former husband's death, Priscilla still remembers him and the time they shared together as some of her life's fondest memories. What's more, number 6, Elvis had a higher rating than it deserved. Luhrmann's Elvis is currently sitting at the top of the food chain with a 7.6 rating on IMDb, a pretty high rating for a site that normally never goes beyond a 4. 2022 saw the release of some pretty phenomenal films, including Everything Everywhere All at Once, Top Gun Maverick, Turning Red, and Licorice Pizza. pizza. It was a great year for cinema following the temporary halt we saw during the pandemic. A great year, that is, in spite of Elvis. That's not coming from us. That's coming from a few users on Reddit who believed that the movie had a higher rating than what it deserved. The users argued that part of the reason why the movie scored over a 7 was owing to Butler's performance, Luhrmann's cinematography, and the fact that fans wanted to like a biopic on a musical legend. Emphasis on the word wanted. That is, they essentially forced themselves to believe that a film with no real plot was worthy of a 7.6 rating. Again, that's not coming from us. That's from the good folks over at Reddit. Entering the top 5, Elvis being dramatized. Everyone has a story to tell. It's just that some people have a better story, and others add embellishments to theirs. Many believe that while the actual musician himself had a pretty iconic life filled with stardom, controversy, and tragic demise, Luhrmann's retelling focused on minuscule aspects of his life, and even then dramatized them. This included the filmmaker's emphasis, or overemphasis, on the fact that Elvis delivered overtly sexual stage performances. A few users commented on the rather awkward exchange between the musician and his female entourage in the very first scene of the film. Sure, the encounter was a bit uncomfortable to watch, but Luhrmann put it in the film anyway. Why? Because that's what his performances actually were like. Fans would throw themselves at the singer, and he really did perform suggestively on stage. At number 4, people didn't like the soundtrack. One user commented on the fact that while the movie was bearable, Butler's performance was phenomenal, Tom Hanks played his part well, and the rest of the plot was fairly accurate, the one thing that was indigestible was the soundtrack. That sounds odd for a biopic on a musical legend, right? We might have to agree with the Reddit critic on this one, because in spite of the fact that it was a film based on Elvis Presley, it barely had any of his original compositions. The film did have a pretty great soundtrack, but it wasn't fair to the memory of the legend himself that some of his best music was overlooked for more modern music. We're talking about the inclusion of Doja Cat's Vegas. Again, a great musical number on its own, but the 2022 song developed for the film just didn't fit right with a film based in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. For number 3, factual inaccuracies plagued the film. Elvis was a great film, but was it factually correct? Redditors don't seem to think so. To Luhrmann's credit, it would have been difficult to condense a 30-year-long career into a 2-hour film. Plus, a few aspects of the musician's life had to be dramatized to make it seem more appealing to a mass audience. Regardless of the theatrics, a few users believed that Luhrmann played a little too fast and loose with the truth. For example, the filmmaker heavily implied that the United States law enforcement agencies were out to get Presley. We already know that the infamous army or jail hoax was started by Parker to further Elvis's bad boy persona, but he was never under any real threat of being sent to prison. The movie shows police officers spying on the musician's performance, ready to arrest him on signal, but it never got to that point. The truth is that there never were any police officers spying on the musician. Close in at number 2, Elvis wasn't BFFs with African-American artists. Luhrmann made sure that viewers knew that Presley was a voice for change. Only his official biographer believed that he really wasn't. Sure, Presley was a lot braver than many other musicians in his day and age. However, the movie portrays him as a man comparable in his quest for equality to Martin Luther King. He wasn't. Many founders of rock and roll made an appearance in the movie, including Thornton, Sister Rosetta Sharp, and B.B. King, who is shown to be a friend and confidant to Presley. But Presley and B.B. had only once crossed paths in 30 years. Finally, at number 1, the movie was too long. Baz Luhrmann's Elvis was a 2-hour-long movie on the life, trials, and triumphs of Elvis Presley, but fans believed that it was a little too long. Presley was a man who wore many hats, but his prime role wasn't as an actor, a social worker, or a voice for change. He was, and always will be, one of the greatest musicians to have ever lived. Redditors believed that Luhrmann tried to incorporate a little too much about the man in the biopic, some of which wasn't even true. That made the film way longer than it was supposed to be. That's all for today's video. What did you think of Luhrmann's Elvis? Let us know in the comments down below. Be sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more content you won't get anywhere else. Trust us.